It is finally time, guys. We have been walking around and working around piles of Rockwool insulation since you guys seen us unload it from that semi-truck. We have a massive amount, which means a lot of work ahead of us, but it's gonna be awesome because we're into the cold season and it's gonna be nice to finally get this structure insulated so we can maybe bring some heat in here and continue working on the interior. This house, the goal is to make it a high performance, cost-effective, comfortable house for our client. Our goal is to have, very little thermal bridging, which I think post frame lends itself to. We've got these big open bays where our Rockwool is just going to be a huge blanket of insulation. Weather Logic on the outside, we've got the Myrex on the inside, and the Rockwool is going to be that insulator that hopefully is going to make this building a very well-sealed, well-insulated, comfortable home that has good air control. Now, if you don't know what any of those are, don't worry, we're going to go through it all, and there's a lot of benefits to the system that we're using. It's very new to us, but I have lots of people out on social media that I've talked to, building science experts, and this is like a best practice. It's gonna be an awesome, efficient home for my client, and I'm excited for it. So let's go ahead and get into the install. I went to put my ISOtunes on and I never did. Cool thing is, when I picked these up, I used a code that I found on the internet. I think it was RRB10.
RRB10. So one more time for the people in the back. RRB10?
Yes. ISOtunes.com. Now, people always ask about interior wall girts, how we do the corners, and we typically do some form of a toenail with additional blocking. So this block is going to get screwed on the back side. It's going to connect this board, and it'll get nailed into or screwed into this board, which will kind of make a nice tight connection right here. The thing is, we want to limit the amount of framing that we do here so that our insulation can go all the way up and fill this cavity entirely and not just be blocked and inhibited by wood, because wood is good at insulating, but it's not nearly as good as Rockwool. So we want to utilize this space for Rockwool, not framing. This could be a nice sturdy connection. It gives us room to still get insulation all the way out here into our corner. How am I out of nails as I go? Here. All right, now that the perimeter frame is done, you'll see that up at the top. We're gonna snap lines every 4 foot on center so that we can run our ceiling frame that's gonna actually hold up the overframed furring strips for our drywall. And these are gonna get put on with these special hangers. These hangers are undermount, so they're going to get mounted to the underside of our truss, and then they will also get mounted to the face of the truss, but accept purlins or ceiling joists, whatever you want to call them, and that's what our furring strips will get attached to. By doing 4 foot on center in this manner versus 2 foot on center, this is reducing the thermal bridging between the inside and the attic space. The less lumber we have in between bays of insulation, the better R value that we're gonna actually get. So the less framing we use in the ceiling in our insulation bay, the better off we will be. I don't know if you just saw that, but that's why I'm putting screws in these first. That just sucked that in nice and tight because there was a little bit of twist on this bottom cord and the screw just pulled everything nice and tight together. There we go. Well, I'm really cool. Finally, hopefully, getting rid of some of the pile of Rockwool insulation that we've got around the job site so we can start working in here. So we've got our ceiling framed. Now we're gonna start insulating this wall and we're gonna work our way up. So this is just the main room. We don't have all the framing done in the other room because there's just piles of Rockwool everywhere. So what we're doing here is kind of trying to figure out which way we wanna run this. We don't know yet what's gonna happen when we stack another set up. But the nice thing about this Rockwool is it is rigid enough to just kind of sit here. So when I take my 2 more pieces, we're gonna kind of get it set where we want it on the outside, open it up, and then kind of shove it together. And it should just kind of friction fit. This is an R21, and the goal is to run this, then run our Myrex, then we run our interior girts. That will hold everything in, and it will give us a service cavity of 1.5 inches around the entire wall, as well as our ceiling, because we'll do the same thing on the ceiling, for all of our electrical, lights, stuff like that to be mounted where we don't have to disrupt our air control layer. We're gonna go into the business of doing insulation, Greg. We're gonna be so good at it. People will ask us to do their insulation. Like, you guys, you know you should do this professionally. And I'll say, Greg does it on the side. He'll actually do it on the weekend for you. And people will pay you, Greg, because you're that good. Would you do it then? Okay, I think the goal is to try to fit as many fulls into the walls as possible. Then we will come back and fill in all the gaps with cut pieces. I think that will be the most efficient. So we're trying to figure out this layout. We don't want to compress it too much. We want it to be nice and just like a perfect fit. It's just what I was looking for. Are you putting it R21 up? What? So that it says R21 up? Yeah. Okay, just making sure. Making sure we're on the same page here, man. That's important stuff. That is awesome. That's a little too tight up there. Or it could just be a little compressed. Yeah, I like it. See? I do like working with the Rockwool though, because it is so like rigid that it's pretty easy to just like put where you want it.
It's so satisfying when it like
Sits in there nice.
fits together.
I agree. I think I'm ready. I'm gonna put my stilts on, Greg. I guess you just gonna keep feeding me and then I'll like go above the windows with fulls, and it's been a long time. Yeah, it feels like I have long legs. The problem being, I can't reach those. Let me try. Let me try.
Bro, the people don't want to see that.
How about passed out, dude? Set him on the ladder. Yeah, here. Yeah, just set him up on the ladder. Whew, I about passed out, man. Thank you. The Rockwool is going pretty good. I've never actually worked with it at this extent, but it's definitely a very clean install. It's easy to see where your gaps are. You can use all your waste in the little spots. And I've been wearing my mask, so it feels good to take that off for a second. Whew, Greg, I guess no mask for Greg. He's built different. I think the biggest thing that I notice in here is how much quieter it has gotten. It hasn't gotten any warmer, obviously. That's not going to happen, not without a heat source.
It doesn't echo anymore.
Yeah, even when we're talking, it's not as echoey. And I've been rocking the stilts here. I got them up as high as they can go, so I can do all this rock. I got just a little bit more to do over here, and then it'll be some fill-in pieces around windows and doors, and this room will be done. You know, the one nice thing about Rockwool, especially in our situation where we have a concrete slab like this, concrete wall, we can put it right down to the concrete, because remember, this is literally a rock product, so there's no issues. It doesn't soak up moisture. It will, you know, moisture will go through it, but it's hydrophobic, so it doesn't retain water. Hydrophobic. It can get wet. You don't want to get it wet, obviously. I don't know if that's accurate or not, that you can get it wet, but obviously it can sit outside. You want to tarp it. Greg, do you got a piece for me, my guy? Let me finish this little guy. I feel like up here, I can oversee everything. I'm in charge of everything. The world is my oyster.
Get out of here.
I'm just tucking this insulation in right here.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, let me.
Whoa.
Careful. Careful. So I think the Rockwool would stay up. You can see there's a little bit of like, as you push pieces in, it kind of blows out the pieces behind it. So what we're gonna do here is we've got some string, and we're just gonna run it across here, this bay that's on top of the second bay, and you can see what it's done. It's really helped keep this in. So not super crazy tight, just enough that it won't fall out over the weekend or until we put up our Myrex. So we got our first room of Rockwool installed. That's R21. It went in quite easily, actually. We went around and did all of our 4-foot pieces first, put as many fulls as we could, and then we came around and we started cutting up pieces. And honestly, there's not a whole lot of scrap left over, so I think we did a good job at utilizing, you know, all of our material, very little waste. My first scaffold right there. It only took me like 16 years of being a business owner to buy my first set of scaffold. 250 bucks, and I do believe that that 250 bucks will be well spent. It will save us time, effort, energy going up and down a ladder. You know, anytime you're looking at tools or equipment for the business, don't ever hesitate if they're going to make you money. It never is fun spending the money, but it will always be good in the long run, in my experience. That $250 scaffold is gonna have to make me some money. Oh no, how will I get over to the next post? Oh, yeah. Or this. Wait. Over. No. Turn on. Today, I'm all out here by myself. That's going to be a little bit different than the last few days where I've had Etienne and Yusang from Sega out here helping us with the Sega Myrex details, and Dan from Rockwool, who's come out to help install and spent the whole day installing Rockwool in this building with us. It's just me for the next couple days. Greg has got some friends, actually some of our mutual friends are in town, and they're going to go try to do some snowboarding, and they're from out of the state, so I was going to show them around. And so what I'm doing is I'm loading up all this Rockwool, taking it up, putting it into the attic space. As you can see, I've already been doing this, and I'm going to try to run my Myrex, get that all done, framed underneath. You can see these 2x4s back here. This is the cavity where electrical can be ran in to reduce any penetrations in the Myrex. Obviously, it can be taped, it can be sealed, but the fewer times that you go through that, the better it's going to be, the better result. Obviously, we're going to have things that will puncture that Myrex, pipes, conduit, things like that. This will make it easier to not penetrate the Myrex. Obviously, it's more work for just one guy to do, but I'm not afraid of the challenge, so let's get into it. telling you right now, this Milwaukee stapler is perfect for this. It does not overdrive a staple. You have like a ton of flexibility and control on the depth. T50, so standard staples, and it lasts forever. Super comfortable. Adjustable knob here for depth of drive. Let's get this going. Line it up with my line, pull it taut. I mean, even at 8 foot on, or these are 4 foot on center, I should say, look at how nice and tight that installs. That is a OCD person's dream. Now that Myrex is installed, I can go ahead and put my framing up, and I'll do that before I start pushing that insulation down. This might be a little tricky by myself, so we're gonna give it a go and see what happens. It's really hard to get measurements to make sure things are straight because I'm gonna have to be holding in the middle. I might not see both ends. And in order to combat that, I'm going to actually get a perfectly straight line with my laser. The 600G, it's just a line laser, and I'll be able to get a perfect line from end to end. I've got my mark down there. I can see it clearly with a marker. Otherwise, I don't really know how to do this because I don't want to be screwing blocks in everywhere as temporary holders when the whole goal here is to keep holes out of the, out of the air barrier. So yeah, let's see if I can get this. Hopefully it's not too much of a pain. So no problem seeing it. Oh, that looks perfect. And I can see everywhere that is. The problem with this is snapping a line would be very difficult because there is slight bags from 4 foot to 4 foot on this run because there's insulation pushing down on it. I guess I could go ahead and do all of this with the laser. It really was not that hard to set up. $15.3. All right, well, all the framing's up now. On these 2 more runs of Sega Myrex, all the insulation is loaded up in the attic, so there's really only one thing to do here now. 3:30 gives me a couple hours to get all that laid out. It's gonna be a lot of work up there by myself moving around. And I don't know how much you guys are going to be able to see, but maybe I'll try to get a camera set up so you can see just how much fun I'm having up there. It's a lot of work, guys, and a lot of back and forth, but I think it's going to be well worth it because this is going to be an R51. We got the Sega air control air. It's going to be awesome. And the way we did this with the framing every 4 foot, it was a lot more work once again because we couldn't just put the pieces up from down low and have them friction fit between a 24-inch bay. We had to run them this way, but it reduced the thermal bridging by up to 50% because every other floor joist we took out. And since we were doing that 2x4 strapping underneath for like a service bay to run wiring and have the can lights get cut out, nothing's going to hit that Myrex, which means nothing should be accidentally poked through without knowing. It'll only be the pipes or wires that we know about, that we're doing, and that we can detail at the time. So I think this is going to be awesome. There's still a lot of work up here. It's about the end of the day here. My mic's probably going to die. My camera's probably going to die. But I think you can see just how nice this is up here. So here what we've got is this bay, we're not done insulating it because we need to first close off this bay. As you can see, you can see my hand because this is open. We've basically got a balloon frame structure with our posts, which means there is no top plate on each floor section. So what we're doing is we're gonna put some blocking in so that we can install this OSB. And this OSB is basically going to just close off this section, which, you know, we want to limit the amount of air that's circulating through either thermal conductivity. You get that like chimney effect where the cold air is going to sink into the bottom of your wall, and you don't want that coming out of your attic. So we're trying to air seal this area right here. The beauty is with the Rockwool insulation, it's so dense, it will definitely limit the amount of air movement naturally in the wall versus other products like fiberglass, cellulose, or if we were spray foaming this, we would still have almost an entirely empty cavity because we have so much thickness and we'd only be putting like 3 or 4 inches of spray foam. So this whole system together, it's gonna be pretty sweet, but we have to make sure that we close off this cavity, and that's what I'm working on right now. Actually, this is a multifaceted benefit here because we rip this all down on the table saw, and what it's going to allow us to do is potentially use it to straighten out this board also. So it's going to be snug, and it looks like it's tight in my middle, and that's actually okay because I'm going to use it, and it's going to straighten out. Cool. So you see that now? This is going to be solid. We can insulate this, and we're going to stop some of the air movement from attic space, which is unconditioned, going to be similar to the outside air, and not going to hopefully drop into our wall cavity that's going to have some warmth to it from the heated side. Oh man, I just realized, guys, I did not throw my ISOtunes in yet. Now here on the side wall, unlike the end wall, we actually framed this so that we could just take our board and put it right on top. We've got outside framing and inside framing where we can nail down and cap this off. And what it does also is it gives us this overhang where when we frame in our boards that need to mount the ceiling, which you'll see here in a little bit, it gives us a little something to kind of connect to and hold to. So this is actually a lot easier. We can just nail this right on top. So you see it compress that Rockwool. And then what I can do is this board here, this could have some, in or out because it's connected on these posts 8 foot apart. What I can do is just eyeball it, which this one is pretty good, but I have the ability now that it's connected to the outside wall that I can push and pull this wherever I wanted to. There. So now that cavity is completely sealed off also from the attic, and it separates the upstairs attic space from the wall cavity. All right, so we're ready to start running our Myrex, which is our air control air up here, and we got a mark here so that we get overlap on this side, and you'll see why in a little bit. But it's important to start with a nice straight line because anytime you're running out like a sheet good like that, you want to run straight, otherwise it gets kind of wavy. So this product is really, really quite nice for this, but we got to make sure that we start straight. So we're just going to do a quick snap line. Greg, are you good?
Yep.
There. Nice. And then the next thing we're going to do is we have a couple options. We can staple this up, which we've done, and that's perfectly fine as long as you're not burying your staples through the product. But what we're going to do is we're going to be using this. This is a Sega double-sided tape, and you don't want your gloves on when doing it because it's really sticky. but we're going to be running this on the underside of our joist. And that's what we're going to be sticking our Myrex to. And you might be like, come on, the tape, is that really going to hold it up? Yeah, it's pretty impressive. We've already done some, and it works great. The only thing you want to do is make sure that you're going to roll it. You don't want to just put it up. So I'll kind of run it by hand and then come behind and make sure I get a roll. This is where these stilts are coming in handy too, because as long as I don't trip on anything, it makes it quick work to just walk down this joist. Now there's obviously a little bit of time involved in running the tape out versus just, if you're stapling it, you can just go to town, start installing it. But obviously this is going to reduce penetrations into your air control layer. So the fewer penetrations, the tighter of a building, the more energy efficient it can be. So it is important actually, and it says it right on the Myrex, you want to make sure that the printed side is facing towards your conditioned space. And I'm using a stapler, but only where the tape is going to cover it anyway. And it's just to get it started, throw a staple in the underlap as I'm pulling on it, kind of. All right. All right. This is fun. So now that we have this line defined here, then we're going to go back to the middle. And then we're just going to work it from the middle out. You get that roller? And then we're just going to use a squeegee or a roller and going to make sure that that's nice and tight. And this corner here, we'll have to do a little bit of detailing because of the extra material, and we still want it to be airtight, so we'll deal with that when we do our walls. I don't think I did this one, did I? There. All right, so now that we have a nice straight line established, the Myrex has a line on it that's 4 inches from the edge. That is going to be our line that we use to keep running this. So as you can see, by using the tape, this stuff is staying up no problem, and now there's no penetration. So look at that. It's nice too because when you put a staple in this material, the weight of it will kind of sag in between. But by doing the tape on this whole joist like this, it's just like perfectly flat. Kind of compare it to like a drum top or something. It's pretty nice. Okay, so we're not going to keep going with the Myrex. What we're going to do is now underframe it with what we're calling our service cavity. It's going to be a 2x4 drop down. And what that's going to allow us to do is have our electrician be able to run some of his wires in that area without punching holes into this. And then we will load this ceiling up with insulation, and then we'll go up there and insulate. So it is a process, but it's going to be one time done, and then this house will be insulated and efficient for the rest of its life. So this is the service cavity that we're framing down now, and it's going to be 1.5 inches of openness that our drywall will attach to. But every time the drywaller puts up drywall, if we're cutting can light holes out, which we're just using those thin wafers, you won't have to actually puncture this to cut it. So that's going to keep the air barrier complete. And we're using, this is a number 10 4-inch screw from GRK, framing screw, and it's not going to go nowhere. And if the drywaller can't hit a 3.5-inch ceiling joist here, then we got problems. So it should be really easy for the drywaller too. What are you doing, Greg? 22 1/4? We could probably get away with using like a ring shank nail here, but I feel a lot better having the drywall hanging off of these guys, having them screwed in to our trusses. Yeah. And as long as our framing isn't right on the tape joint, we'll go ahead and just frame it and come back through. I'll probably just put my stilts back on and tape that all at once. Because when the Rockwool is up there, it gives us something to push against and get a good tape seal. I don't even need nails for that one. That was a good cut, Greg. All right, now that we have this framing up, let's go ahead and load this up with insulation. Yeah, that's the one I was waiting for you to do.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Around screws.
Okay, well, I got it. Don't worry. There. So we're going to load this ceiling up with insulation for this bay, and we'll get that installed, and then we'll just kind of work our way as we go, one bay at a time. Maybe 2 bays at a time. We'll see. So now that we have this Myrex up, we have this section of framing done. That's what I'm standing on here is the 2x4s. We're going to start laying out the bats of insulation. And I know people are going to ask, Kyle, why bats? Why didn't you just blow this in? First off, this is like going to be a complete Rockwool insulated structure. But second off, blown in insulation has compression that occurs to it as soon as you start, or as soon as it's installed. So it will slowly compress and lose R value. This will not. So it will stay close to its true R value forever without having to come back up here every so often and top it off with more blown in, which is what you have to do with a fiberglass or cellulose product. A lot of people don't know that, but it's true. So we're going to be running an R38 in these bays, and then we're going to crisscross it with some R13. Look at these things, man. These are some beefy bats right here. You've only got 3 bats per bag. So it does take quite a few bags. And we're just going to go ahead and start this in the back. We're going to save this. We don't want to throw that away because we could use those little pieces. Luckily, my post is in the corner and it's a pretty square cut, but we get a better friction fit when we go this way. And then once we get the corner done, then we're just going to set these right in place. I found that by tapping them, you kind of get them to move and get tight together because we don't want any air space between them. So we want to get them nice and tight. Okay, I am ready for either R13, Greg, or another 38.
Yeah, I'm not even cut open this bat of 38.
Okay, yeah, sweet.
Up a little bit of room here and
Okay, this one I'll cut. Okay. So you can see doing some crisscross, just to limit any thermal transfer between any joints that maybe I didn't do a perfect job. But the other thing I wanted you to notice is now that we're up here, you can see where the ventilation for our soffit is. That's our vented soffit. Now, that's not done over there yet. We haven't finished the siding, so we've got a little bit of an open end on our soffit yet. But the netting here is to keep bugs out of, coming in through the soffit because the soffit vented LP Smart Side does not have a screen on it. And in hindsight, I would have loved to have put a screen on the Smart Side. Next time we will do that. So take note, if you're going to do a vented soffit with LP Smart Side, put some of this screen over top of the vents so nothing can come into your soffits. Unfortunately, it's already installed. There's nothing I can do about it on this time, and I guess it's always good to learn. But what you can see is that when our insulation is done in our 2 rows, we've still got our full air to come through. That's a huge soffit vent there, and you do want more air in the soffit than you do out of your ridge vent. kind of like forces it to like go up, and that's what you want it to do, like a chimney effect. You want all that air to come through the soffit and get pulled up to your peak. So this is a very important detail for an unconditioned attic space like we have. So now I'm just going to work myself out by covering this all up with R13 because I don't want to have to come back in this corner once I'm out of here. Now, you may be asking yourself, watching this happen, and saying, why are you guys running 4 foot on center framing? Wouldn't it have been easier just to do 2 foot on center framing and put those bats right in that 2 foot bay? And yes, it might have been a little bit easier, but my thought was, and I could be wrong, every time we took out one of these 2 foot on center ceiling joists, we reduced the potential for thermal bridging between the heated and unheated areas. So every one of those 2x, they're not as good of insulation as straight up insulation. I'm getting an R38 on this 9 inches versus a 2x8, which is 8 inches times, Greg, do you remember what Dan said about R2, R1.5? I'm not exactly 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 or 1.5 R value per inch on wood. So we wouldn't be getting a full R value every 2 foot, and there's a potential for air leakage or air movement or less thermal efficiencies because there's no insulation every time you go up against a stud. Now with Rockwool, obviously that's better because it is such a tight friction fit. But that was my reasoning, because we were going to do a service cavity anyway underneath. There wasn't a need for all this framing up in the actual ceiling. So hopefully that makes sense. If you got questions, you can always drop them below in the comments, and I can always take a look at that. All right, that's the rest of the ceiling that we will do for now, because back here is the garage. We're going to leave that open while the client, they got some piping and some plumbing work like vent pipes that they're going to want done up here. So we're just going to hold off on the garage, and then you'll see I left this little pathway that you can kind of walk on the framing, get to where we need to go, and then when we're all done up here, we'll detail everything, work our way out of this attic space, and then cover up this last little section with some R13. But it's laid really nice tight joints. Should be a good insulation. And remember, a big reason that we did not use blown-in insulation like a fiberglass or a cellulose is that over time, basically as soon as you install it, it starts to compress. When that material compresses, you lose R value. With Rockwool, stone wool insulation, it's not going to do that nearly as much. You're going to maintain the R value for the most part the life of the product, so which is probably going to be outlasting any of us. So let's get out of this attic. I'm sweaty and I'm ready to be done.